Greetings, acolytes and lore junkies to the archives, and welcome to today's video. A long time ago in the channel's history, I produced a series of what-ifs surrounding the idea of Qui-Gon Jinn training Anakin. The series was ultimately left on a cliffhanger, because in truth, I wasn't entirely sure where to take the story. For years, you have all been asking for What If Qui-Gon Jinn Trained Anakin Part 3, and after having so much fun with the Shattered Timeline series, I have finally decided to return to the topic, the one which has probably been the most requested video over the last 6 years. But you all have waited so patiently and eagerly for so long that simply giving you Part 3 was insufficient for me. Therefore, we here at the archives now proudly present to you the full remastered series of What If Qui-Gon Trained Anakin, including its long-awaited conclusion. I sincerely hope you all enjoy. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, but not the galaxy we know, Obi-Wan feels his heart beating fast as he sprints forward. His muscles ache from the drawn-out battle, his stamina is ebbing, but he has to catch up, because now his master was battling the Zabrak Sith alone in the corridor. Their blades swept and twirled with finesse as Qui-Gon drove the assassin deeper. Kenobi had almost made it, until his path was cut off by the factory's ray shield. Up ahead, Maul paced like a hungry predator, and Kenobi's master fell to his knees, falling deeply into the Force. The feeling was now palpable. The Force was surrounding this moment in time. The next few minutes would determine the fate of Anakin Skywalker and the fate of the galaxy. Obi-Wan knew it. Kenobi struggled to catch up to them. His abilities had been dampened by Darth Maul's dark side influence. He hadn't been able to use his Force powers at peak capacity for this entire duel, and he was worried it was about to cost them everything. But then, he sensed liberation. Peace and serenity flooded his limbs, and he felt invigorated. The full power over his command of the Force had somehow returned, and it was obvious why. Qui-Gon Jinn, instead of trying to refresh himself with the Force, had utilized battle meditation to punch through Maul's suppressive power over them. The Zabrak had sensed it as well, as he had stopped pacing and snarled, igniting his saber staff. The ray shields finally drop, and the battle is back on. Qui-Gon springs forward with the very last of his stamina, continuing the assault that he had pressed earlier. But Kenobi, now able to summon Force speed, vanishes down the corridor in a blur, arriving at his master's side right as the ray shields reactivated. Having failed to separate the Jedi, Mao now feels himself cornered in a small room, overwhelmed by their blades. Deciding to fight another day, Maul makes the hard choice to accept failure and runs. He turns, and he leaps down the same shaft that he would originally have fallen down in defeat. The battle is over, and both Jedi collapse in exhaustion. But the day is won, and Qui-Gon Jinn lives. Now having narrowly escaped the jaws of death, Qui-Gon engages in the victory celebration on Naboo. But as soon as it is over, he wastes no time in bringing both Kenobi and the young Skywalker back to the High Council. However, now his opinion of them has dramatically diminished, even far more than before. Qui-Gon already did not believe that they followed the true will of the living Force, and was concerned that the Order had lost its way. But now he was sure that they had become blinded, and now his frustrations were mounted because they did not heed his warnings. They did not sense the Sith as he did, and because of that, he, Obi-Wan, and Anakin were all nearly killed by this mysterious assassin. For the first order of business, he nominates Obi-Wan Kenobi for knighthood, explaining that his Padawan had not only held his own against a Sith, but saved his own life in the process. The request is granted, much to Obi-Wan's elation. But then Master Qui-Gon gets down to why he is truly there, the matter of Anakin Skywalker's training. Now emboldened by the recent events, he insists more assertively than before. He should take the boy as his student. The Chosen One's arrival coincides with the return of the Sith, and the Force has now brought them into conflict multiple times. In the original timeline, the only reason Anakin was trained was because it was Qui-Gon's dying wish. The Council, except for Yoda, unanimously voted to allow the boy to honor Qui-Gon's memory. Here though, they remain stubborn. Because Qui-Gon is alive, his death has not moved them. Windu and Yoda restate their position that they had several days earlier. The boy is too old, too afraid, and his future is too dark and clouded to properly assess. Qui-Gon finally removes his restraint. He becomes angrier than Kenobi had ever seen him. Qui-Gon proceeds to lay into the council about how obvious it is that Anakin is the Chosen One, the one that has been sent to destroy the Sith now that they have finally returned. To not see that is not only being willingly blind, but neglectful of the duty of a true Jedi. The Council themselves are so caught off guard by this outburst that they too are stricken to silence. Once it's all over, Qui-Gon turns his back on them with a sad look, a face that Obi-Wan knows far too well. His master had just made a dramatic decision, and with a heavy heart, Qui-Gon says this: if his training will not be sanctioned by the Jedi, it will be sanctioned by the Force. I hereby resign from my post as an active member of the Jedi Order. Qui-Gon Jinn's departure sends ripples throughout the Order. It has everyone talking. Of course, news reaches Master Dooku as well, who in Legends is still a part of the Order during this time. The two of them meet on the roof of the temple of the city to discuss Qui-Gon's departure. Dooku was incredibly fascinated by his choice, because he too had been long growing discontent with the Jedi. Ever since the horrors of Galadran, he had refused to take any more missions from the High Council. Dooku believed that they were being ordered around by a corrupt Senate. Publicly, he had now been speaking out actively against the Republic's recent actions. Privately, Dooku had even been flirting with the dark side, entertaining the idea that one could use it without being corrupted. However, as they talk though, Dooku comes to find out that Qui-Gon's reason for disillusionment are different from his own. They are not political, but surrounded by the prophecy of the Chosen One, this boy that Qui-Gon had picked up from the desert world of Tatooine, a seemingly meaningless world. According to the Darth Plagueis novel, Dooku spoke with Palpatine during this time and laughed at the idea of Anakin being the Chosen One, even supporting the Council's decision to not have him trained. And so here, we believe that Dooku would restate this disapproval, asking Qui-Gon if he believed that this was worth leaving the Order over. Qui-Gon crosses his arms over his chest and firmly insists that he's never been more sure of anything in his entire life. It's then when the two men peer into one another through the Force. Qui-Gon is troubled to find a touch of darkness within his old master, something that goes beyond simple discontent. Dooku, on the other hand, senses the resolve in Qui-Gon, sees that he has found a true calling in the Force. Not only this, but he is broken free of the chains imposed upon him by the Jedi Order. Now intrigued even more, Dooku asks Qui-Gon how he knows the boy is the Chosen One. Jinn expresses that the boy radiates with the power and gifts of the Force. The fact that he has a higher midichlorian count than Yoda is just the very beginning. He is a walking vergence, a nexus that is hidden under an unassuming presence, a being that could become the most powerful Force user the galaxy has ever seen. He could become something entirely beyond the Jedi or the Sith, yet the Jedi are too blind to sense it. Dooku loosens up on his skepticism and considers Qui-Gon's words carefully. Finally, he speaks. If the boy is as powerful as you say, then he needs a more experienced hand to wrangle him. Dooku declares that he too shall aid in the boy's training. Now grinning, Dooku announces that from the ashes of the complacent Jedi, that they shall bring about a true change in the galaxy. From Anakin, they can create something new, something beautiful, something truly powerful. Qui-Gon takes a slight step back, feeling something in his master that he's never sensed before. The touch of darkness he had just sensed a moment earlier had stretched into a bleak shadow. Dooku's eyes burn with something besides passion for training the young boy. And after having dueled with a Sith Lord recently on Naboo, Qui-Gon is now familiar with what he sees in his old master's eyes. He sees the dark side. Seeing the concern materialize on Qui-Gon's face, Dooku's grin fades, and he says that perhaps he will be called upon in the future. He did not mean to imply that Qui-Gon would be insufficient to train the boy. He simply wanted to offer his services. At this, Qui-Gon relaxes, stating that when that day comes, that he'll gladly accept the call. The two share a bow, and Qui-Gon departs. But then Dooku says this: Qui-Gon, you will let me know where you are, and how things are going with this young Chosen One, won't you? Qui-Gon pauses for a moment, looks at his friend and says, "Of course, Master," before leaving. The very next morning, Qui-Gon and Anakin prepare to depart. The young Skywalker had felt a little uncomfortable being in the temple any longer, especially after Qui-Gon's fallout with the Council. It seemed word of that too had spread, despite the Council's best attempts to keep their business private. Because of that, Anakin had eyes on him wherever he stepped among the Jedi. This morning he stayed on the ship, waiting for Qui-Gon. Many in the Jedi Order are melancholy to see such a great and legendary master depart, but none more so than Obi-Wan Kenobi. The two have a final conversation just before takeoff, wherein Obi-Wan finally vents his true feelings to his master. He admits that he thinks Qui-Gon rushed his decision to leave the Jedi, and wishes the two could have at least talked before. Qui-Gon places a warm hand on his former Padawan's shoulder, and states that the reason he didn't was because he knew Obi-Wan would be successful in talking him out of it. For of everything from his Jedi life he was now leaving behind, nothing was harder to leave than his own Padawan. The two embrace in a warm hug, and when that happens, Qui-Gon slips Obi-Wan a communicator and whispers that he senses many great changes coming in the years ahead. For this reason, they need to stay in contact with one another. As they separate, Qui-Gon sternly instructs him to tell no one. Following, Qui-Gon and Anakin leave Coruscant. Obi-Wan Kenobi would be the last Jedi remaining behind on the launch platform, staring up into the sky for some time. In hyperspace, Qui-Gon sits in deep meditation. There was a lot for him to sort out with the Force. He had just left the only home that he had ever known. He doesn't quite know how to properly prepare Anakin for his destiny, as the weight of the task may be too much for him to bear alone. What's more, his troubled mind lingers on his conversation with Dooku. Had his oldest friend and confidant truly stumbled into the dark side? Dooku had always been harsh, but he couldn't be a traitor, could he? This reminds Qui-Gon that he now has new enemies to keep an eye out for. The Sith from Naboo was still at large, as is the other Sith in the shadows. Like all Jedi of this time, Qui-Gon is aware of the rule of two, but currently has no idea if Maul is the master or the apprentice. Qui-Gon calms himself, and he seeks the Force for answers, and after many hours of meditation, Qui-Gon receives a vision. In his dream, he sees a beautiful field of flowers in the daylight. It is a serene meadow with many types of creatures frolicking about, feasting on the fruit that it provides. The sunlight sparkles off of the dew of the grass, and all is well. But then the sun begins to set, and day becomes night. Darkness bathes the land, and the frolicking creatures run to hide in their burrows. For a moment, it's just darkness, and all seems bleak. But then the stars can be seen, and then the moonlight. And the daylight flowers close, giving way for the bioluminescent plants to blossom. Nocturnal creatures come out to play, to make noise, creating a spectacle of a new kind, the still and serenity of night. The vision gives Qui-Gon the answer that he seeks: light and dark, day and night. The dichotomy can exist in harmony when both create and preserve life. The Force exists in both, and in the same way, Anakin must become a master of day and night if he is to fulfill his role as the Chosen One. He must not succumb to the dark side, but neither can he fear it. He must harness the balance of the Force to reach his destiny. The revelation is a weighty epiphany on Master Qui-Gon, and he wonders how he can expose Anakin to the dark side in a controlled way. He himself is a Jedi, a champion of the light and the light alone. He needed to find somewhere that could properly show Anakin both sides of the Force. It had to be somewhere remote, secret. Knowing the Jedi, they will all attempt to keep tabs on Anakin, so he needs a place that both the Jedi and the Sith will be hesitant to visit. Once again, Qui-Gon opens himself to the Force for his answer, and a single planet makes itself known. The very thought of it makes Qui-Gon's eyes pop open. Jinn usually followed the will of the Force no matter how strange or unexplained its instructions were, but even he had to admit that this one was taking a real heap of faith. He slowly and hesitantly entered the hyperspace coordinates to the world of Dathomir. Chapter 2: Alignment. Anakin breathes heavily as he sprints through the forest of Dathomir. He expertly bobs and weaves through the trees and leaps over fissures in the ground. The lightsaber hilt that he had constructed dangling from his belt repeatedly bounced against his thigh as he ran, reminding him of his own heartbeat. He grimaced in distaste of his own diminished stamina, expecting more from himself. It had been around 10 years since Qui-Gon had arrived, had set up their new home on Dathomir, and since that day, he had been in non-stop training. Anakin had already grown far more powerful than his childhood self would have ever dreamed, yet he knew he was capable of so much more. And any time he was put face to face with his own limitations, he took it as a personal challenge and broke through each and every barrier. That was, of course, aided by Qui-Gon's tough training in the hostile world of Dathomir that he now called home. Much like Tatooine, this place chewed up the weak and spat them back out, so adapting for survival was the first true test of his skill and resolve. But ever since coming to conquer the wilds, Dathomir had become home. It was definitely prettier to look at than the endless dunes of Tatooine were, but Qui-Gon wasn't his only teacher now on this harsh world. At that moment, he was on his usual run back home after his lessons with Mother Talzin. Anakin vividly remembered the day they arrived on the world, the meeting that Qui-Gon had with the Night Sisters, unwilling to let Anakin out of his sight. Qui-Gon had no choice but to bring the boy along. Anakin remembered being far more afraid that day than he was when he met the Jedi Council. Within the dark cave coven, they sat around a table. Talzin had been kind enough to summon them something to drink out of mysterious cups, but Anakin followed Qui-Gon's lead and didn't touch the refreshments. Originally, Qui-Gon had just wanted to ask permission to make their home on Dathomir. He didn't want to be seen as intruders, so he requested to remain unbothered by the Night Sisters, so long as he and Anakin stayed out of their business as well. Talzin of course disliked the Jedi, and was not too keen on letting them stay. That was until Qui-Gon said that they were no Jedi. Intrigued, Talzin initiated a deeper conversation, hoping to learn the real reason that Qui-Gon was there. The Master decided that honesty was the safest bet, so Qui-Gon explained that he was raising the Jedi Chosen One. Only on Dathomir could he experience both sides of the Force if he is to ever destroy the Sith. This piqued Talzin's interest, and she stated that while she had no love for the Jedi, she definitely had aught against the Sith. 20 years prior, she had been betrayed by a certain Darth Sidious when he promised to make her his apprentice, but took her son from her instead. Shocked by this information, Qui-Gon realized the Force brought him here to learn the truth of the Sith as well. Following a lengthy conversation, Qui-Gon learned much about Sidious and the origins of Maul from Talzin. Talzin not only sanctioned them a peaceful space to live, but also volunteered to help train the boy. After all, no Jedi can properly expose young Skywalker to the dark side. Once again sensing the Force's will in motion, Qui-Gon Jinn accepted. Anakin contemplates all of this while parkouring his way through the trees. The sun had almost fully set now, and the shadows of Dathomir had grown long and dark. Anakin knows the Night Sisters are dangerous, and he didn't fully trust them even after growing up around them and learning their ways. They certainly never let him get comfortable in their coven, often looking at him with a certain measure of distaste. Talzin herself was a harsh teacher who cared little for Anakin's own well-being. She only seemed preoccupied with how his ultimate destiny would serve her greater wills in the end, and even after a decade, her heart had not softened to him a single bit. This was apparent by their training. As a child, one of his first lessons was to spend a night surrounded by venomous insects. This was to make him confront his fear, to either conquer them or to embrace them. The insects would only respond to sudden movement and panic, so Anakin was forced to stay absolutely still while the wretched things crawled all over his body all the night long. But this was also apparently necessary for him to take the first steps in learning their mysterious ways of magic. A new way to wield the Force. Just earlier, he was blindfolded, forced to fight the native rancors on the planet without his lightsaber and without the Force, only utilizing Night Sister techniques and magic. Drawing from the Ichor. Upon inquiry, Qui-Gon had told Anakin that he needed to know these powers. He needed to acquaint himself with the dark, but it was a different branch of the dark side, one that would not seduce him to corruption. Not only this, but these were abilities that his ultimate adversaries, the Sith, would not be familiar with, meaning that not only would he know their tricks, but have many of his own that they could not counter. But his main training, the one he truthfully preferred, was with Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon gave him more traditional Jedi training, focusing on listening to the living Force, and along with this came an education in the lightsaber as well. Qui-Gon taught him in the basics, just as he did with Obi-Wan. Qui-Gon had kept Anakin in the basics for many years, before teaching him anything more advanced. At first, Anakin used Qui-Gon's form of Ataru, a heavier style with a focus on wide two-handed strikes. But because of his youthfulness, Anakin was able to employ more acrobatic movement. Eventually though, Anakin took to the fifth form. Its raw attacking power and ability to use his bottomless wells of energy spoke to him on a deep level. However, Qui-Gon did not let him put all of his energy into offense. Qui-Gon was careful to teach Anakin moderation, to conserve energy when necessary, falling back on certain Form 3 defensive sequences. This enabled Anakin to achieve an energetic, but a well-balanced style. The two drilled often and intensely, with Qui-Gon being sure that Anakin would be ready for the formidable challenges that lie ahead. Eventually though, as Anakin began rapidly growing in power, Qui-Gon admitted to finding it difficult to keep up with his young pupil. The boy was powerful, very powerful. As Anakin ran, he unclips his lightsaber from his belt, ready to use it to light his way home. As he lifts it, he took a moment to appreciate it. It wasn't luxurious by any means. It had been constructed out of fallen starship debris after all, but it was functional, and it was his. With the flick of the switch, a yellow blade sprang from the hilt, bathing the area in a golden glow. The crystal he had imbued it with was found in one of the deadly Dathomir caves the Night Sisters had recommended. Qui-Gon would often tell Anakin that the color would be like a beacon of light, guiding his way through the dark, and right now, it was guiding his way home. To help Anakin discipline his large stores of energy, Qui-Gon had him run to and from his lessons with Talzin whenever it was her day for training. Along the way, Skywalker was to practice his breathing techniques, to reach out and connect with the wildlife through the living force. Finally, he had made it all the way home, where he sees the usual smoke rising from the hut that he and Qui-Gon lived in. However, as he approaches, he notices that his master's usual calm presence was disturbed, different. As Anakin walks into the hut, he sees the now gray-haired Qui-Gon pacing uneasily in front of a small hologram message lying on the table. Anakin did not recognize the man in the image at first, but his identity became clear as he spoke. Immediately, Anakin picked up on the Coruscanti accent. It was Obi-Wan Kenobi. "Many things have changed since you have left, Master," Obi-Wan had been saying, especially with the balance of the Jedi Order. "Following your departure, there was an uproar. A faction of Jedi arose who believed it was heresy for the High Council to reject the Chosen One. Leading them and stoking the fire was Master Dooku. Debates and arguments in the temple halls became intense. I was worried it would come to blows. But just a few weeks ago, after I had arrived from a mission of Seleucami, I found the temple in a stage of great distress. Dooku had formally taken a faction and apostatized. Hundreds of Jedi have left the Order, following him to the Force only knows where. The Council is trying to assure everyone that all is well, but many are calling this the next great schism. Master, I too have deep misgivings about Dooku's intentions. I do hope you and the boy are alright." With that, Qui-Gon turned off the message and looked up to Anakin with a weary smile. He states that he's had this message for several years now, and while he has sought the Force for answers on what Dooku has been doing, he has ultimately found nothing. Anakin calmly asks if Dooku has become a Sith. Qui-Gon heaves a sigh and responds that the rule of two makes that impossible, but that Dooku has definitely lost his way. At night, Anakin and Qui-Gon have their usual meal and nightly meditation, and Anakin asks his master to tell him another story before they go off to bed. Anakin hasn't left Dathomir for years and desires great adventure, always loving hearing tales of Qui-Gon's exploits from his days as a Jedi. Because of this, Anakin felt like he knew a lot about the galaxy, about the Jedi, and especially about Obi-Wan, who was a frequent mention in the stories. Qui-Gon obliges him, but only because he knows Anakin does not like sleeping. The boy's powerful connection to the Force meant that he frequently had dreams of the future. And night after night, Anakin complained about seeing frightening images that he did not understand. Qui-Gon tried to soothe him with advice, but most troublingly, Anakin often foresaw the galaxy consumed by war, a shadowy figure pulling the strings, hidden by the dark side and by influence. This night, however, Anakin's nightmares were different. He often saw cosmic things that made him toss and turn, but tonight, it was personal. It was his mother. She was suffering. Awakening with a start, Anakin immediately went to his master and told him of this dream. Qui-Gon was deeply disturbed at the idea that Shmi could be in trouble, but told Anakin to be mindful of his feelings. What the Force reveals to them often has many meanings. However, Anakin is adamant that he needs to see his mother again. It had been too long, and he needed to check on her. Qui-Gon also wondered what had become of Shmi ever since he had sent her a starship part that would have bought her her freedom. And so, gathering supplies, Qui-Gon and Anakin make an impromptu trip back to Tatooine. On the way, Qui-Gon sternly warns his apprentice about his lightsaber, to keep it hidden, and to not use his powers unless absolutely necessary. The two of them needed to maintain a low profile. Just like Anakin did in Attack of the Clones, they follow the trail back to the Lars by questioning Watto, but once they meet the farmers, they are told the story of Shmi's kidnapping by Klieg. Anakin, though wrought up in emotion, does not rush off in a rage like he does originally. Rather than having his feelings forcefully suppressed, Anakin has been taught to use his anger and to harness it in different ways by Mother Talzin, and Qui-Gon had taught him patience and mindfulness. Qui-Gon joins Anakin in staring at the sunset. He can feel the depths of despair within his apprentice, and despite all of his training, Anakin was still wrestling with overcoming the anger that was welled up within him. He refused to accept that his mother was dead. He was funneling his rage into summoning a green orb of energy between his hands. This magic sphere revealed the location of Shmi, who was indeed still alive, but barely. Anakin looks at his master and states that he's going after her. This version of Anakin is not defiant by any means. Qui-Gon, being a proper father figure, would have trained him to have respect for his master, respect that Anakin never gave to Obi-Wan. But because this has to do with his mother, neither is going to wait for permission. Qui-Gon knows he cannot stop his young Padawan, but he cannot let him go alone into danger, or worse, into the dark side. Qui-Gon nods and says that they will both go. Master and apprentice together find the Tusken camp in the Dune Sea and sneak their way into the torture tent. Anakin finds his mother just as she did before, and she shares with him her final words of love and affection. Feeling her life slip away between his fingers, Anakin quickly summons magic, hoping to desperately save her life. However, she had endured far too much torment by this point, and her body simply gave out on her. Anakin slowly closes his hands into a fist to extinguish the magic he had summoned, once he realizes his mother has passed. His master Qui-Gon comforts him, placing his arm around Anakin's shoulders, and rather than going on a killing spree, the boy simply sobs in his master's robes. Once again, because his emotions had not been repressed, Anakin does not blow his top like a pressurized volcano. Instead, he's able to process his emotions openly in the moment. However, Anakin's cries awake the Tusken sentries, who quickly find the two inside the tent. As they bray their war cries, Anakin thrusts his hand out, intending to send a force push to throw them all back. Instead, what happens though is an explosion of force power that freezes the sentries in their path, slowly shatters their Gaddafi sticks, before sending them flying out of the tent and beyond the visible dunes. The action shreds apart the torture tent as well, exposing the two of them to the horde of shouting Tusken raiders that are pouring out of their huts now. Back to back with green and gold lightsabers in hand, Master and apprentice fend off the raiders. Qui-Gon intends to fight non-lethally, cutting the Gaddafi sticks and forcing them to stumble into one another. But Anakin lets loose. His attacks are more savage, resulting in him critically injuring one of the Sand People. Qui-Gon shouts at him to regain control, to get his mother. Shaken in the fury of the moment, Anakin obeys and fetches his mother's body, running her over to the speeder that they arrived in. But upon turning around, he sees his master surrounded, overwhelmed by the Tusken raiders. In a moment of desperation, Anakin prepares to unleash a force explosion, hoping to knock them all away. However, if he did that, he knew he would surely hit his master as well. Anakin is forced to rationally think this through, or risk injuring Qui-Gon. Concentrating all of his anger, despair, and sorrow, Anakin chants in the arcane tongue of the Night Sisters, and lifts his hands to the air. His eyes begin to glow a piercing green. With magic, he summons a convincing illusion of a massive fire-breathing serpent, similar to a crate dragon. Of the Sand People who were all surrounding Qui-Gon now, they ceased their attacks and fled in terror. Qui-Gon stares up in awe, himself shocked at the scale of Anakin's power. He had known a few masters of the Council, Yarel Poof to be adept at conjuring illusions, but what Anakin created was so gargantuan, so real, that for a brief moment, Qui-Gon wondered if his Padawan had summoned a real creature from beyond. And so, Anakin Skywalker has defeated the Tusken Raiders without resorting to slaughter, saving himself from his greatest mistake, the creation and the birth of Darth Vader. The two depart for the Lars homestead after this, and have an official funeral for Shmi, where Anakin is able to mourn for his mother properly. However, on the way back to Dathomir, Anakin wonders why he didn't have the power to save her, even though he was supposed to be the chosen one. He was not as powerful as he should be. How could the galaxy be saved if he can't even save his mother? He confides in his master. Qui-Gon carefully explains that being the chosen one does not mean that he is the master of life or death, nor does it make him all-powerful. He is the Force's champion, the one meant to serve the will of destiny. not his own will. Taking revenge on the Sand People would have not brought his mother back, nor would it have administered justice. It would have only perpetuated more death, which is what the Sith do. Qui-Gon comforts him, stating that Shmi has become one with the well of energy that is the Force, the same energy that the two of them call upon every single day. She is still with him every time he uses his gift. She is a part of the energy that flows through him now. This soothes the young Skywalker, and he is able to come to terms with his mother's passing. Skywalker and Jinn make it back to their hut of Dathomir. Unfortunately though, it does not seem that there will be any time for rest. The holocom that Qui-Gon kept on the table was chiming yet again, showing that it had a new message waiting. With Anakin present, Qui-Gon plays the transmission. Rather than the friendly face and voice of Obi-Wan that Anakin had expected, a different man appeared. Tall, imposing, standing with an aristocratic air of himself. It was Dooku. "I hope this transmission finds you well, my friend," Dooku begins, as Qui-Gon sits on his knees in front of the image. "Surely you've been aware of the ripples created by your departure from the Jedi Order, Qui-Gon. Indeed, many bold Jedi have rejected the Council's dogmatic ways, seeing them for the liars and the tyrants that they have become. They have lost their way, twisted by the corrupt Senate that they serve. And for this reason, my friend, I have joined the courageous movement to turn away from such heresy. Following your lead, I have long since left the Jedi Order, taken my own new acolytes to my homeworld of Sereno, where I have reclaimed my title as Count. I have created a new order, Qui-Gon, a beautiful order, one divorced from the unethical teachings of the Orthodox Jedi, and I want you, my dearest friend, to be a part of it." Anakin looked to his master, and Qui-Gon shifted uncomfortably. "But of course, I've already told you all of this in my many earlier transmissions, Qui-Gon." The tone shifted immediately. The hologram continued. "I suppose I'm repeating myself in the vain hope that perhaps the messages haven't made it to you until this one. I would hate to think that you're intentionally avoiding me. You've neglected to contact me all these many years, and have never shared with me your location as you promised. But that is of little concern now, because I know exactly where you are, and I am paying you a visit very soon, my young apprentice." Qui-Gon's eyes closed, and he instantly sat straight up. Anakin felt his chest tighten. "You've been quite busy, haven't you, my friend? Even after leaving the Jedi, you cannot fight the Jedi need to intervene in conflict, not even on a world so remote as Tatooine. Please, Qui-Gon, let us not make our first meeting an unpleasant one. You have nothing but gain by joining me. With the might of a new order and the Chosen One by our side, we would be unstoppable. We could destroy the Sith, bring peace to the galaxy, and lead a new order, a righteous, correct one. I implore you to respond to this message, Qui-Gon. I have waited a long time, and my patience has grown thin." The transmission ends, and Qui-Gon sits there for a long time with a grave look on his face. Anakin asks if they're going to run, but Qui-Gon shakes his head. He says that he needs to try diplomacy first. He knows his master, and he thinks that he can get through to him. But he looks up at Anakin and tells him plainly that when Dooku arrives, Anakin is to remain in the hut and to do exactly as he says, no matter what. Anakin agrees, but finds his own response reluctant. Almost immediately afterward, the hut seems to grow visibly darker. A disturbance happens in the Force as a dark presence arrives to the world of Dathomir. The two sensed it before they heard the rumbling of starship engines, shaking the forest around them. Dooku was here. Qui-Gon stands, and once again tells Anakin to stay in the hut before he leaves. The way he said it reminded Anakin of when Qui-Gon had told him to stay hidden in the cockpit on Naboo. And now, he somehow felt just as helpless as he had then. Qui-Gon stands with his arms together in his sleeves as the boarding ramp to the shuttle descends slowly. Out saunters the Count, wearing an armor-weave cloak and fine clothes. "My old friend," Qui-Gon says, as the two men embrace one another. "I see you've made good use of your time." Qui-Gon looks over Dooku's shoulder to see a group of dark-robed figures exiting the extravagant shuttle, spreading around the area. "And you, my former apprentice, humble as ever," Dooku responds as he gestures to Qui-Gon's small hut, where Anakin is now peeking through the crack in the door. There is a brief pause, where all seems stiflingly quiet. Dooku, Qui-Gon says confidently. The boy is safe here, being trained by me. Please, leave us. Dooku's brow narrows, and he scowls. When I made my way over to this wretched planet, I knew we'd dispense with the pleasantries eventually, but not so quickly, Qui-Gon. You have been gone a very long time, and I have much to show the boy. Prophecies are old. Prophecies can be useless. They can mean nothing. Let me simply speak with him. I have made powerful moves in the galaxy, and have made many powerful friends. I did not come here as an enemy, my old friend. I have come with a proposition. The time of the Jedi is at an end. It is the twilight of their era. A new era will soon begin. An era of peace. An era of order. You have no idea the reaches this new order is capable of achieving. Dooku. Qui-Gon stops the Count mid-sentence, reaching towards his belt. It is time for you to leave. No, Qui-Gon. Dooku responds with a grimace. It is time for your final lesson. Chapter 3, Tribulation. Anakin's breath caught in his throat. All he had done was a blink, and suddenly 2 lightsabers had appeared from seemingly nowhere. Qui-Gon's green and Dooku's orange blades. They were now locked together, cracking and sputtering between them. The dark acolytes that surrounded the two made no moves but to observe. To Anakin's surprise, the duel is nothing like he had expected, nor that he had ever seen before. His and Qui-Gon's duels were usually very energetic, explosive. However, what he was observing now, 2 masters of the sword locked in what was more akin to a dance. Both Qui-Gon and Dooku are measured in their strikes. They would attack, parry, and riposte with incredible grace and efficiency. There isn't a single wasted movement between the two of them. Neither one moves their blade a millimeter more than is necessary. From Anakin's perspective, it doesn't seem that either one will fully commit to aggressing or defending. They traded blows while stepping in perfect sequence with one another. They would prod at one another's defenses, then suddenly explode in a flourish of precise movement, stepping circularly around one another. They would then break off and try to study each other's movements before engaging yet again. Dooku's one-handed cuts and thrusts came fast, like the snapping jaws of a Dathomirian Vorator lizard. Qui-Gon's broad two-handed strokes would defend against multiples of these thrusts in one swing, before countering with his own heavy blows. However, Anakin realized something very troubling. Despite the duel lacking fanciful movement, Qui-Gon is expending significant effort. He's more focused than Anakin has ever seen him, unblinking and staring straight into Dooku's eyes. But with every block, he grimaces, as if just narrowly escaping death. The Count, on the other hand, is grinning wildly. He looked as though he had been waiting for this for years, and the evidence soon became apparent. To Anakin's horror, the duel turns against Qui-Gon's favor. Now Dooku is advancing, driving the Jedi Master back. His power seemed to be growing the more he fought. That feeling of darkness that Anakin had felt when Dooku arrived, it grew heavier. He could tell Qui-Gon was tiring. Through the crashing and clashing of sabers, the two were sharing words, though Anakin couldn't quite make out exactly what they were saying. Master Jinn can still turn this around, Anakin thought. He always does. He never loses. This was true. For although Anakin had many close calls with defeating his master in lightsaber combat, Qui-Gon always seemed to undermine him at the last minute, turning the duel on its head. Surely he could do it again now, but it did not seem to be happening. If Anakin didn't know any better, Qui-Gon had met his match. Or perhaps, Anakin shuddered, his superior. We do think that Dooku is better than Qui-Gon here. Our reasoning is based on age and power level at these points in the timeline. Qui-Gon is 60 during the Phantom Menace, so here he's roughly 70 years old. Even at 60, Qui-Gon was already forced to make several compromises in his lightsaber form in order to better suit his age. He wasn't able to be as energetic in his Ataru style, nor was he able to remain in sustained prolonged duels. He was an excellent duelist, of course, but he often loses steam very quickly due to the demanding nature of his style. He only dueled Maul for a minute or so on Tatooine before totally collapsing after. His death to Maul originally was due to this exact reason. His poor stamina left him wide open. But also during the entire duel, we can see that Maul was giving him the runaround. Even at the beginning, the assassin was able to land kicks on him and push him away. And again, Qui-Gon was 60 here. In our story, he's much older, so we believe these problems are exacerbated. While he would be wiser and more powerful in terms of abilities in the Force, his age is still going to distinctly impact this duel, and especially his ability to sustain himself in a prolonged lightsaber fight. Dooku, on the other hand, is vastly superior to Maul in terms of dueling skill. Not only this, but even at 80 years old in Attack of the Clones, Dooku was able to stalemate Grandmaster Yoda without losing steam. This is all due to him having accepted the dark side, which supercharged his abilities and his physicality. Now in the timeline, Dooku has not trained with Darth Sidious. He's not quite as powerful as he would have been as a fully fledged Sith Lord. However, he has trained in the dark side, and he has allowed himself to cut loose, so he's extremely formidable, and more than exceeds Qui-Gon at his old age. Besides, Dooku taught Qui-Gon everything he knows about lightsaber combat, and if Dooku is able to keep pace with Master Yoda's Ataru, then he would certainly be more than capable of handling Qui-Gon's. This is compounded by the fact that Makashi is Ataru's natural counterstyle. Master Qui-Gon is at a distinct disadvantage in basically every arena in this duel. Anyway, Skywalker's fears are confirmed when the two men lock sabers once again, and Qui-Gon suddenly shouted back at the hut, "Anakin, run." The command startles Anakin, but once he saw Dooku's attention turn his way, he knew that he had to obey. Bursting from the front door, Anakin took off at full speed into the jungle behind him. Dooku glances over at a few of the dark acolytes and subtly motions his head, signaling them to give chase. 4 dark acolytes pursue Anakin into the jungles of Dathomir, bobbing and weaving through trees. He runs for what feels like forever, but he can sense his pursuers closing in. Suddenly, Anakin jumps into the air and vanishes in a shifting green mist, using a Night Sister technique he learned from Mother Talzin, teleportation. Confused, the Dark Acolytes make it to where he disappeared, and they look around. Then, Anakin suddenly appears out of another cloud of emerald smoke above them, ambushing the Acolytes with his yellow lightsaber in hand. His first cut carves one Acolyte head to heel down his back. A powerful force push blasts another Acolyte off his feet and sends him careening through one of the alien trees nearby. Both the trunk and all of the bones in his body shatter on impact. The remaining Acolytes engage Anakin with their own orange blades, but despite attacking him together, they can't seem to make him so much as move from where he's standing. Anakin's blade forms a golden whirling shield around himself, moving at such a velocity that he disarms one of the Acolytes just by parrying his blow. A sharp kick crumbles the attacker to his knees. The Acolyte who remains standing begins to back up. Anakin bears down with a series of harsh, raining blows, one that makes even his muscles shudder. It doesn't take long for him to miscalculate where Anakin's blade is about to be, causing him to get slashed hip to shoulder across the chest. Anakin suddenly leaps forward, doing a back somersault over a boulder that had just been thrown at his back. The final Acolyte that remained alive was holding his stomach where he had just been kicked, and was sending a telekinetic barrage Anakin's way, using whatever was around them. Anakin dodges, ducks, and slashes the debris out of his way while advancing, lightsaber held in hand. The terrified Darksider unleashes his best force push possible. One Anakin simply tanks, shouldering his way through it the same way that he did with Ventress on Yavin 4 in the original timeline. Skywalker then lifts his hand, hoisting the Acolyte high up into the air before slamming him back down violently. His final attacker briefly struggles to stand, but then ceases to move. Despite in the brutality in how Anakin finished the attackers, he actually felt no anger while doing so. He was simply worried about Qui-Gon, and didn't think to hold back in the moment. Looking around at his handiwork, Anakin would feel a pang of guilt, not trying to spare them as Qui-Gon would have. But a disturbance in the Force would quickly shake Skywalker from his thoughts. A disturbance coming from their campsite. Ignoring Qui-Gon's command, Anakin runs back. Meanwhile, back at the hut, as soon as Anakin had left, Qui-Gon pushed off of Dooku's saber. Using his last stores of stamina, he pushed an aggressive sequence, using tight two-handed blows from as many angles as he could manage. Dooku expertly defended himself, but a tricky flourish from Qui-Gon's blade caught him unexpectedly, knocking his saber aside. He was wide open for a critical blow, which Qui-Gon intended to take. Unfortunately, by now, he had overextended himself, and had fully ran out of steam. What should have been a duel-ending blow came off sluggish and sloppy. Dooku recovered from having his guard opened, and sharply intercepted Qui-Gon's blade with so much force that it knocked the Jedi's lightsaber clean from his hands. "You have fought well, my old friend." But you are no Yoda, Dooku began, and even if you were, neither of you could fathom how far beyond you my Jedi powers have grown. And with that, Dooku raises his hand and unleashes a blast of force lightning that catches Qui-Gon square in the chest, knocking him to the ground. My foolish former disciple, only now do you see the power that I am offering you. Dooku moves towards Qui-Gon. Don't continue to delude yourself by serving an inferior side of the Force. Age comes for us all, but as you can see, the dark side opens pathways to avoid its degradation. Qui-Gon shakily pushes himself up, breathing heavily now, his long hair draped over his face. By forgetting who you are, you have already degraded yourself, Dooku, to the Force and to me. Before Dooku can do anything else, they are interrupted by a bolt of energy striking the ground. Turning around, they all look up to see a host of Night Sister warriors, all of them wielding energy bows. The one in the front tells Dooku that he is an intruder on their world, and that he must leave immediately. Dooku simply raises his hand, and blasts the Night Sister with Force Lightning. This is all it takes for a massive fight to break out. The remaining Dark Acolytes ignite their lightsabers, and begin fighting off a hailstorm of energy bows. Dooku, meanwhile, has Qui-Gon bound and brought aboard his shuttle. The Acolytes are forced to retreat by the Night Sisters, who continue to fire at Dooku's shuttle when it takes off and finally leaves the atmosphere. Before Anakin reaches the campsite, he sees Dooku's shuttle flying overhead, climbing higher and higher into the sky. By the time he gets back, he finds their entire homestead in ruins. The battle has destroyed the hut, and the bodies of both Night Sisters and Acolytes litter the ground. The only home Anakin has ever known for the past few years, destroyed. His master, gone. At first, Anakin is filled with an overwhelming anxiety that he will lose his master just as he lost his mother. However, he senses in the Force that Qui-Gon is still very much alive, and with hope. Dooku will not kill him anytime soon. They were friends at one point after all. Nevertheless, Anakin makes a vow to find Qui-Gon, and to not let what happened to Shmi happen to his master. After searching around, Anakin finds Qui-Gon's lightsaber, clipping it onto his belt. He also finds the holo communicator Qui-Gon had been using. This gives Anakin an idea. If he was going after Dooku, then he would need help. The Night Sisters certainly didn't care enough to help him, nor would they likely leave the safety of Dathomir. Right now, there was only a single person that could help Anakin get his master back, and that was Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi. Being back on Coruscant made Anakin pretty uncomfortable. He never did get used to the sprawling metropolis, and it was still too cold for his taste. But there was another reason he disliked being here currently. Upon landing, he would immediately sense that something was wrong. Not only was it way colder here than he was used to, but there was a darkness present on the city world. It was similar to the feeling he got upon Dooku's arrival, but this darkness was different, somehow even bleaker. But what troubled Anakin the most was that it was a vague feeling, one that faded in and out of his perception. It was definitely there, but nearly impossible to pin down. What he is sensing is the presence of Darth Sidious. Palpatine's powerful ability and concealment keeps him well hidden from the perceptions of nearly all beings. He is aided by the veil of the dark side that has blinded the Jedi to the future, and even towards present insight. However, the veil does not affect Anakin. Anakin knows both sides of the Force, and he is one of the only beings in the galaxy that can pierce that veil. This enables Anakin to somewhat vaguely sense the presence of Sidious, but not well enough to locate him, and not well enough to know exactly who he is. But that's not important to him right now. He's trying to get to the Jedi Temple, and based on where he's landed his ship, he has a long way to go. Anakin had no money, so he wasn't able to land just anywhere on the surface. He had to descend down into a sinkhole that led to some of the underlevels of the city world. Only there did he find a suitably unnoticeable place to land, where no one would immediately ask him for credits. On his way in, Anakin saw the Jedi Temple in the distance, recognizing it from his youth. Although he didn't know the path directly, he knew it was generally north. Anakin begins navigating through the seedy underworld streets, the walkways of the lower levels of Coruscant. Because he was in a hurry, he didn't bother trying to blend in at all. Instead of walking on the ground, he leapt and jumped over the catwalks from one side of the building to the next. He already stuck out like a sore thumb due to his Outlander clothes largely geared towards survival on Dathomir. But as he's going along his way, Anakin would happen upon a group of thugs harassing 2 children. Based on the kids' screams, it seemed that the men were trying to abduct them. Acting quickly, Anakin would leap into action, igniting his lightsaber and landing between the men and the children. One of them shouts something like not needing a Jedi in their business, and they open fire with their blasters. Because of Qui-Gon's training, blast deflection is a cakewalk for Anakin, and in no time flat, he takes care of both of the thugs. However, this time, he's careful to either disarm or to administer minor injuries only, wanting to act in accordance with Qui-Gon Jinn's teachings. Anakin is not eager to just go on killing sprees, and because of this, he scares off most of them, but manages to keep one of them from escaping. The one he questions on why they were trying to abduct children. After some intimidation and forced persuasion, Anakin learns about an underground slave ring that the men work for. Skywalker feels a hot burning in his chest. It looks like Kenobi was going to have to wait for a moment. A detour was now necessary. Meanwhile, at the Senate building, one Chancellor Palpatine looks into the distance, grimacing while looking out of his window. A disturbance in the Force has rippled through his perceptions. The dark side of the Force informs him that it is time for him to have a meeting with one of his old contacts. After telling Mas Amedda to cover for him, Palpatine goes to his private yacht, donning his dark cloak and sending a holocom signal to none other than Count Dooku. Over the past several years, Darth Sidious has been very busy. In the past, he had been egging Dooku on to suddenly leave the Jedi. However, unlike in the original timeline, Sidious did not get the opportunity to continue their negotiations. Qui-Gon never died, so Dooku was not immediately pushed to leave. Instead, Dooku remained a part of the Jedi for a few years longer, until ultimately deciding to lead his own movement, one that resulted in a sect of the Jedi following him in apostasy. Because he began his own dark Jedi Order, Sidious was not keen on trying to recruit him as his new apprentice. Besides, Maul was still alive and serving his function extremely well. It did not please the Dark Lord in the slightest that Maul had failed to kill Qui-Gon and to orphan the boy, but he still continued to move pieces around to get the Clone Wars beginning. But those plans now looked very different that Dooku was involved. Sidious still begins the cloning program on Kamino, but is forced to use Maul as his proxy for negotiating with Jango Fett. He has been trying to get the Separatist movement off the ground, but it has been a struggle. They do not have a charismatic leader to talk them into secession. Sidious has had to work directly with the cowardly Gunrays and the other Separatist leaders who are largely non-committal to war with the Republic. At this moment, Palpatine had been in contact with Dooku, hoping to sway him into leading the Separatists. This had piqued Dooku's interest, as he sees it as an opportunity to overthrow the Republic, to rule his own galactic faction with a new Jedi Order. And so, Dooku here is still not a Sith, but he is clearly a Sith conspirator. But this meeting by hologram will not be their typical negotiations. Sidious contacts the Count and says as much, stating that he feels a disturbance in the Force, one that he has not sensed before. A powerful and a complex presence has settled on Coruscant. Dooku thinks for a moment, and mentions that it is likely Skywalker running to the Jedi for help. Dooku then tells Sidious about the recent events of Dathomir, and how he has Qui-Gon Jinn in his charge. Alarmed and angered, Sidious says this: Skywalker is alive, and he's been trained? Dooku nods. The one Qui-Gon is adamant is the Chosen One. Palpatine remembered how much his master Plagueis had feared Qui-Gon. He was different from the other Jedi, more perceptive. Sidious knows that if he's trained Anakin, corrupting the boy is now out of the question. In fact, getting anywhere near Anakin is not advisable. The disturbance Palpatine senses is an omen of the dark side. The boy could destroy him, therefore he must die, and soon. Sidious dispatches Maul to personally handle the issue. Ever since Naboo, Maul has done little but train into the greater heights of a physical perfection. Not only has he not lost his legs, but he has spent the last 10 years furthering his studies as Sidious's official apprentice, unimpeded by Darth Plagueis. The Dark Lord was highly displeased with Maul's failure, and tortured him perpetually for Naboo. But after, he continued to send Maul on assassinations. Since that day, Maul has killed many Jedi, including even members that belong to the High Council. Sidious wanted the Sith to remain, to be present and a visceral threat to the Jedi. A reminder that peace was over. He wanted a distraction to mask what he was planning with the Clone Wars, so Maul continually hunting down the Jedi has kept them paranoid and afraid of the Sith. Nowadays, Maul is more lethal than ever, and is still sporting his full potential. The apprentice enters his ship, the Scimitar, activating its cloaking effect. It would be easier to scour Coruscant in his ship and to ambush young Skywalker once he triangulated his position. For now, Maul is going to plug his network of underground contacts in hopes of learning Skywalker's position. And of course, this doesn't take long at all. There is chatter on many of the underworld channels, asking one another about a rogue Jedi cutting up around level 1000. Many of them are wondering when the Jedi started taking a vested interest in their turf. But Maul knows immediately that this must be Skywalker. Very rarely do Jedi ever leave their precious temple and actually go to the depths of Coruscant. Maul veers the Scimitar and plunges down into one of the sinkholes, heading directly for the underlevels. Anakin's lightsaber slashes apart another blaster. A Clatulian thug goes hurling over a stack of crates. All around him, children and families of various species locked in cages cheer in many languages. After following the lead from the street thug, Anakin has found a warehouse full of slaves being prepped for shipment, and he is currently mopping up what remains of a small army of lowlives. Anakin whips his blade behind his back, redirecting a blaster bolt back to its origin, nailing the thug directly in the chest. That was the last one. For the next few minutes, the young Chosen One slashes apart cage locks and slave collars to set the people free. There is a part of Anakin that feels deeply completed by his actions. He has saved many of these children from his own childhood. But one thought stung in Anakin's mind, spoiling his mood. How could this be happening under the nose of the Jedi? How could they not know? Or worse, why weren't they doing anything about it if they did know? He was heading to them for help, but how could they be of any help if this rot existed on Coruscant without their intervention? Anakin exits the warehouse, guiding the families out and sending them on their way. But suddenly, he feels a disturbance in the Force, a presence he has not felt since. Anakin whirls around and ignites his blade. A crimson lightsaber clashes against his, stopping just centimeters from his face. However, Anakin's eyes look past the blade at his attacker, and he finds himself looking into the fiery orange blazing eyes of a man who has haunted his nightmares for years. It was the Zabrak from Naboo, the Sith, Qui-Gon's enemy, the son of Mother Talzin. But whatever name she had called him, it was unlikely that he would ever answer to it anymore. Maul pushes Anakin back and begins a ferocious single-bladed assault. Anakin defends himself while rapidly retreating. Onlookers scream and run in various directions. Anakin was too distracted with parrying the oncoming strikes to sense that he was reaching the edge of the level 1000 platform. Maul kicks Anakin over the railing, sends him falling down to the depths below. Skywalker manages to land on a passing vehicle, incurring confused cursing from the alien driving it. Maul viciously pursues, jumping and landing on another hapless civilian's vehicle, but he tears the driver out of it, dominates the speeder with the Force, careening it directly towards Anakin. The two then begin dueling across the sky lanes, stopping only to duck under passing vehicles or catch their balance after sharp turns. The terrified driver of Anakin's speeder dives sharply in order to shake him off, forcing Skywalker to depart and jump, landing on the back of Maul's vehicle. He backbends under a strike that would have decapitated him instantly, and the two clash blades once more. Maul pushes aside a heavy blow from Anakin that damages the speeder's engines, sending it flying to a series of catwalks. Finally, Maul abandons ship, and Anakin jumps into the driver's seat to attempt to steer the crashing vehicle away from crowds of civilians. Anakin is partially successful, jumping out of the speeder at the last moment as it hits a defunct fountain. By the time he stands back up, Maul has tossed away his robe. He has begun stalking in a circle around Skywalker, igniting his saber staff's second emitter. Anakin stares at his opponent and reaches for his belt, grabbing the lightsaber of Qui-Gon Jinn. He presses the activation, and the emerald blade springs forward. Adopting Jar Kai dual wielding, Qui-Gon has trained Anakin in a single-bladed combat style, but after watching the Knight brothers fight, Anakin began practicing in Jar Kai privately. Now seemed like the perfect time to test his skills. Maul jumped forward, helicoptering the lightsaber behind him before asserting a series of rapid staff strikes from either end of the weapon. But Anakin met his attack, Jumping forward into a lethal two-bladed spin, the two met in the middle of the plaza platform, exploding in a light show of colors. This was not the elegant fencing of Dooku and Qui-Gon. This was like two vicious nexuses battling for dominance, neither one relenting. Anakin's gemso lent itself well to the two-bladed style, and he employed Qui-Gon Jinn's Ataru footwork for added kinetic energy. The strength and might of his blows caused Maul to balk and to change tactics. He shifted his Juyo form into being as erratic, as unpredictable as possible. He became a rapid river of black and red, mixing in unarmed strikes with lethal blade work. This forced Anakin to prioritize parrying to countering his blade, leaving him open to a rogue fist or foot that would catch him out of the blue. Their vicious, primal combat took them out of the intersecting catwalks that laced across the open chasm of Coruscant city levels. Anakin soon found it difficult to move around, as they moved out of the tight bridges. Instead of being able to move around Maul now, he was locked in a linear path of movement. This came to Maul's advantage. His saber staff was able to form a screen directly in front of him that Anakin could not seem to penetrate no matter how much he tried. In response, Skywalker vanished in a puff of green mist yet again, appearing behind Maul in a jumping kick right at the Sith Lord's back. This sent the Zabrak falling down to the catwalk directly below them. He barely managed to roll to one side as Anakin's two blades slashed down where he had just landed. Maul looked bewildered at what Anakin had just done, but he lunged forward to attack yet again. Anakin was ready, parrying with one of his blades and vanishing, reappearing on Maul's right side with a slash directly aimed at his head. The Zabrak had sensed it this time, bending in the nick of time to the side to save his own head. However, the Dark Lord snarled in pain as one of his horns had been shaved off by Anakin's passing blade. He stabs his second blade behind him to hit Skywalker, but he only penetrates green mist. Anakin had moved again. Now paranoid, Maul jumps a good ways back to avoid Anakin's next reappearance. But when Skywalker landed back on the catwalk, he gestured twice with his lightsabers, tearing two Durasteel sheets off the walkway and sending them flying at Maul one after the other. Whirling his double saber around, Maul slashes apart the first, but is hit in the stomach by the second. This sends him flying clean off of the catwalk and out of Skywalker's vision. Anakin rushes to the side of the walkway to try and locate him, but all he sees is the infinite lights of Coruscant's traffic below. The Zabrak is nowhere to be seen. Following this attack, Anakin sheathes both of his lightsabers and starts making his way towards the surface. At first, it was because he needed to get his bearings after getting turned around in this duel with Maul, but something else was egging him forward now, a feeling in the Force. Something was about to happen he needed to be there for. Once Anakin jumped his way up to the highest rafters, he saw a massive ship descending through the clouds. He would have already recognized the shiny reflective vessel, but what confirmed his suspicions were the two accompanying starfighter escorts. They were Naboo ships. The starfighters landed alongside the larger ship, and the boarding ramp lowered, allowing for a royal-looking group of people to disembark. Immediately, Anakin felt a palpable disturbance in the Force. Moving without thinking, he used Force speed to close the gap between himself and the ship. As soon as he arrived, he telekinetically yanked the entire group of people off of the ramp, sending them tumbling unceremoniously to the landing platform. Within moments of him doing so, the ship exploded, throwing anyone left standing to the ground. Anakin has just thwarted Zam's first assassination attempt on Padme Amidala, and rescued her decoy in the process as well. Anakin and Padme come face to face for the first time in years, and neither one can believe their eyes. Anakin didn't really talk about it to Qui-Gon Jinn very often, but he frequently thought of Padme, ever since he had departed Naboo. He hoped that one day he would see her again, and although the circumstances were not ideal, he finally had gotten the chance. Padme, however, didn't quite recognize Anakin at first, but snapped to when he asked her if she was alright. She was shocked to see how much he had grown, and it seemed to her that he had successfully become a Jedi. Anakin decides to take another detour to bodyguard the Naboo ambassadorial party to Amidala's suite. While Captain Typho reaches out to the Jedi Council and the Senate Guard, Padme and Anakin take a moment to catch up. Anakin explains where he's been all these years, and why now he's back on Coruscant. and that while he's not exactly a member of the Jedi Order, he knows all of their ways and is heading to their temple now. Although Anakin wants to rescue his master, an assassination attempt being made against Padme also catches his attention, and privately, he can't help but wonder to himself if perhaps Maul were behind it. Captain Typho re-enters the room and gives the news that the Council will be dispatching a Jedi duo in order to oversee Amidala's protection. They have selected Master Plo Koon and his young Padawan Ahsoka Tano for the task. Typho also informs Anakin that the Council wishes to see him immediately. He had mentioned Anakin's rescue, and the Council was surprised to learn that he was present on Coruscant. Anakin had little personal interest in speaking with the High Council. He was really just there for Obi-Wan. But maybe if they too knew how much danger Qui-Gon was in, then they could help him against Dooku. Anakin spends a little bit more time with Padme before Master Plo and Padawan Tano arrive. Then he gets in their transports and is taken directly to the Jedi Temple. At the temple, Anakin is brought before the Council for a meeting. All of the Masters are astounded at Anakin's power. Without him even doing anything, they can just sense how much he's grown under the tutelage of Qui-Gon Jinn. However, they do sense something else within him. A touch of the dark. This is unsettling to them, as they start trying to interrogate Anakin about his training, about the whereabouts of Qui-Gon Jinn. Anakin tells them what has happened with Dooku, and that Qui-Gon is in grave danger. Anakin had arrived to ask for their help, retrieving his Jedi Master and to bring Dooku to justice. Unfortunately, while the Council is definitely disturbed by these events, they do not seem very motivated to help. They explain that Dooku nor Qui-Gon is officially a part of their order, therefore this classified as a personal dispute. If they were to take action against Dooku, it could be seen as a declaration of war, and they have no interest in beginning a conflict with Dooku and his disciples. Besides, as the Jedi explain, Dooku is a political idealist, not a murderer. Surely two old friends and former wise Jedi could sort things out. Anakin is distressed by this. He calls them cowards and traitors for not helping their own. But one of the Masters snaps at Skywalker. It is Mace Windu, saying that if he only knew the Jedi's history, if Qui-Gon had bothered to teach him, then he would know that they cannot provoke a war against Jedi apostates. Historically, according to all of the past Jedi schisms, it would only result in more death and destruction than the galaxy could afford. However, the Council debates a bit more. They do eventually concede that Dooku went too far by abducting Qui-Gon Jinn, so they do appease Anakin by saying that they will reach out diplomatically to Dooku. For Anakin though, this is far from good enough. He firmly states that if they're not willing to help him, then he will go after Qui-Gon alone. Anakin storms out of the Council chambers and asks where he can find Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan is both surprised and overjoyed to see Anakin, but Skywalker tells him that they will have to exchange pleasantries later. Qui-Gon was in danger, and he's the only one that could help him. Kenobi hears out Anakin's hurried explanation and is deeply troubled. He doesn't like the idea of potentially disobeying the High Council, but he was not going to leave Qui-Gon hanging. And with that, the two take a speeder back to Anakin's ship and immediately leave Coruscant. Anakin desperately searches the recordings in Qui-Gon's holocom until he finds the message that he has been looking for, the one that Dooku sent him shortly before his arrival to Dathomir. And that's when Anakin finds what he's looking for. Dooku mentioned his home planet of Sereno, where he reclaimed his titles. Surely, this would be the place to start looking for Qui-Gon. Chapter 4: Destiny. The two arrive on Sereno in less than a few days, and as soon as they touch down, Anakin is able to weave a spell that can track Qui-Gon. Anakin had figured out from Coruscant that being away from Dathomir meant that his magic was weaker, since it relied on the ichor that flowed naturally through the world there. However, it could still be used in contained amounts, so while he wasn't able to track his master from across the galaxy, he could still locate him if they were on the same planet. Anakin used Qui-Gon's lightsaber as the focal point of the spell, since it was a personal object to his master. And sure enough, a wispy green trail illuminated their way towards Qui-Gon. Skywalker and Kenobi followed through the forests and cities of Sereno until they came upon what was unmistakably Dooku's palace. It was the most extravagant building on the entire world, and placed under heavy guard. Both battle droids and dark-robed acolytes patrolled the outer gate and the courtyards as well. A few simple mind tricks and illusions here or there, and both Kenobi and Skywalker are able to take out the sentries and steal their cloaks. Following this, sneaking into the castle Sereno is a rather simple matter. There's only a few times when they get caught up by dark acolytes, those where the mind tricks will not work. But in those cases, the combined sword skill of Anakin and Obi-Wan quickly overwhelmed them. The two are pleased to find just how well they work together. For Anakin, he's unaccustomed to working alongside someone so straight-laced, but Obi-Wan exemplifies the courage that he had come to expect from the Jedi. For Obi-Wan, working with Anakin felt like just like another journey with Qui-Gon. His maverick ways and the off-the-cuff thinking reminded him deeply of his Jedi Master. As they journey deeper into the castle, the two wielders of the Force reach a diverging path. Anakin's spell traces Qui-Gon being in the dungeons below, but the Chosen One senses something different. The heavy presence of Dooku above. Feeling a deep desire to make the Count pay for what he has done, Anakin suggests that they split up. Kenobi agrees, reasoning that if they both free Qui-Gon first, that it will alert Dooku, and they will be surrounded before they can make it out. And with that, Obi-Wan takes to the dungeons, and Skywalker ascends the staircase. In the dimly lit throne room, Dooku sits on the floor in deep meditation and focus, but his eyes open instantly once he senses Anakin. Suddenly, two dark acolytes that were flanking his doorway are lifted off of the ground. They flail about before they are forcefully thrown into one another, knocking them both unconscious. The door opens, and Anakin strides in, tossing aside the dark robe and taking both lightsabers off his belt, the gold of his own construction and the green of Qui-Gon's. Dooku simply appraises him with wild amusement. "Ah, Skywalker, I knew that it would only be a matter of time. I was looking forward to your arrival." Anakin smirks. Not often someone looks forward to losing, Count. The Count raises up from the floor, sneering somewhat at the boy's insolence. "Don't be so sure. We need not be adversaries. Your master is quite safe. I would not have harmed a hair on his head. If anything, he has been my honored guest. I knew that you would come looking for him, Anakin. I wanted to see if you would be successful. I wanted to see if you would pass this test. Qui-Gon holds you in such high esteem, so I deeply desire to see your abilities for such a long time now. And I must say, I'm a bit disappointed." By now, Anakin was strafing around Dooku in a circle, and the Count was doing the same, as two experienced duelists often did. Anakin's eyes were locked onto Dooku's, not yet recognizing that he was falling into the Count's trap, listening to him talk. Going to the Jedi for help, Dooku shook his head to shame Anakin. "Though of course I believe there is an upside. You now realize the depths of their ineffectuality. It need not be this way, Anakin. Look around. I am growing an order far more powerful than the Jedi could ever dream of. We could change life for the galaxy as everyone knows it. Under our watch, no child and his mother will ever be sold into slavery again." Anakin stopped. His eyes instantly narrowed. "What did you say?" "That's right, Anakin." Dooku nodded, adopting a grandfatherly look. "Join me, and with our combined powers, we can make things right." Anakin stops, his eyes locked to the floor to contemplate. "It was my dream to become a Jedi, to free all of the slaves." His grips on his lightsabers loosened. His eyes close, thinking of his mother. He thought about the way she looked at him, what she wanted him to become. His grip tightens on his sabers yet again, and his eyes shoot open. "But joining you would only mean the enslavement of everyone, Dooku." The Count snarled. "Foolish boy." His hand raised, discharging a blast of dark side lightning at the apprentice. Anakin immediately ignites both his and Qui-Gon's saber, catching the lightning with the green blade. He then hurls the yellow blade to the right, using the Force to telekinetically manipulate it, to have it arc around towards Dooku. The Count dodges to the side as it whizzes past him. This breaks his concentration on lightning though, enabling Anakin to leap forward with a shout. But Dooku is faster. His fiery orange blade springs from the curved hilt, directing Anakin's savage blow into the floor. Anakin catches his own lightsaber and proceeds to attack Dooku with a heavy strike of Jar Kai, emulating what he did against Maul on Coruscant. But Dooku is no Maul. He is measured, elegant, refined. Rather than being met with aggression, Anakin fought against an opponent that quickly learned to avoid, to redirect his strikes rather than meet them blow for blow head on. He slips and slides away from Anakin, forcing Skywalker to constantly change the direction of his attack vectors, being forced to constantly turn to the right, then the left, keeping him from building momentum in Gem So. Dooku chides him. "You failed to control my center line. Did Qui-Gon Jinn teach you nothing, boy?" Suddenly, Anakin is on the defense now. Dooku had slipped his last attack, turned the aggression against him now. Anakin is forced to give ground, retreats several steps, desperately blocking each one of Dooku's pinpoint accurate strikes. But every step he took, Dooku took one also, somehow matching his footwork to where he couldn't gain any distance. Anakin had dueled Qui-Gon many times, and in almost all of their training sessions, Jinn mentioned how harsh of a teacher his own master had been, how he demanded nothing less than absolute perfection. And now, Anakin was seeing the consequence of a man who had trained that way for decades. Anakin's next parry was just a millimeter off, allowing the whipping tongue of Dooku's lightsaber to graze him on the shoulder. The jolt of searing pain made Anakin hesitate just a half second too long, and suddenly, he heard lightsaber connect with metal. He has no time at all to check with his eyes, but he knows that he has just lost his yellow blade. As the two pieces of his weapon clatter uselessly to the ground, Anakin switches to a two-handed grip on Qui-Gon's lightsaber and finds himself in a saber lock with the Count. "I would have thought that the Chosen One would be a better challenge," Dooku spat. "Perhaps Qui-Gon was wrong about you." With a grunt, Anakin pushes Dooku away and vanishes in a cloud of green mist, reappearing directly behind Dooku, hoping to catch him by surprise. But instead, his blade is instantly parried aside. Dooku seemed to sense it coming with ease. The Count caught Anakin by the throat and lifts him up with telekinesis. "The witch's tricks," Dooku growls, throwing Anakin across the room into the sloping walls. "They were always a nuisance to me. Perhaps when I'm through with you, I will pay Dathomir another visit. I will be sure to give your master my regards." Anakin felt a distinct tug in his chest, a dark aggression rising. The pain in his arm seemed to fuel a different kind of power, a power that instantly rushed to his aid. The force fills his limbs, and Anakin rises, flourishing Qui-Gon's lightsaber and locking eyes with Dooku. The Count seems to notice the change in the boy, and he gives him the Makashi salute, inviting him to re-engage. Anakin struts forward and re-engages the Count again, but this time, he doesn't use any tricks. In the Master and Apprentice novel, it describes how Qui-Gon constantly kept Obi-Wan in the basics of lightsaber combat, never taking him to the more advanced levels until he was very late into his Padawan training. This had exhausted Obi-Wan, until of course, it became apparent that knowing the basics inside and out, and upside down, formed a rock-solid foundation to fall back on. It was from that foundation that Obi-Wan was able to morph his style into whatever it needed to be, ultimately making him a far more effective duelist. I believe that Qui-Gon would have done the same for Anakin, and it is in this moment that the incessant training in the basic avails Anakin, as he falls back on simply what works. His strikes are now simple, raw, but incredibly accurate. He changed the more complex motion for pure, simplistic power and unmitigated precision. For hours upon hours, Qui-Gon drilled Anakin in the same basic sequences until he could do it perfectly without so much as paying attention. And in this moment, when Anakin's instincts finally take over, he doesn't even pay attention to what his body is doing. He simply focuses his breathing, like he did when running between lessons with Mother Talzin. He concentrates on the Force. His eyes have deceived him. Dooku's blade moves too quickly, and too accurately for him to properly measure a defense. Instead, he has to treat Dooku like he treated the Rancors of Dathomir, fighting blindfolded. Anakin has to feel his attacks rather than monitor them. Just as Qui-Gon had always preached, listen to the will of the living Force. Let it guide your blade and your destiny, and let go, allowing whatever will happen to happen. In accompaniment with this lesson, however, an aggression still takes hold of Skywalker. It offers him clarity, it offers him power, and while he's holding back from totally giving in, the dark side is enticing to him. It whispers in his ear, "This is the only way." More and more, his inner grip loosens. His body becomes a storm of motion, and the outside reflects. Dooku suddenly finds himself driven back. Where had all of this power come from? Once again, he tries to slip out from under Anakin's assault, to flank from the other side or to misdirect the attacks, but to no avail. Anakin changed direction as swiftly and smoothly as the blowing wind, yet his strikes came as heavily and unyielding as a rock slide. Dooku finds himself having to spend lavishly on his reserves in the Force. He attempts to parry, to redirect Anakin's blows, but even that is proving difficult. It felt as though he was fighting a force of nature now, something unrelenting. "That's it, boy," Dooku began, hoping to get in Anakin's head, to make him lose concentration. "Give in to your anger. Only your hatred can destroy me." However, Anakin wasn't listening. His expression never changed, and neither did his dogged attack. More than once, Dooku would attempt to force push him backward, but Anakin either recovered quickly or just shouldered through it. Dooku attempted to gain the high ground, jumping up to his desk, but that only positioned him for Anakin to unleash a force push that came like a cargo freighter, slamming into Dooku's chest and sending him careening out of his throne room window. Anakin pursued like a predator of Dathomir, smelling blood. The duel between the two landed them in the center courtyard, in full view of all of Dooku's acolytes. By now, Dooku is scrambling to get away from Anakin. The duel is no longer in his favor, and he can't seem to get his footing. As Anakin closes the distance, Dooku fires off a continuous stream of force lightning, but Anakin catches it all in his blade. It slows him down for a moment, before he continues to press forward, marching against the lightning. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon then immediately exit the palace, the rescue attempt having been successful. The two Jedi can witness the final moments of the battle. Skywalker pushes against Dooku's lightning until the gap is now fully closed, and then Anakin releases a burst of power to neutralize the energy. This also throws Dooku to the ground and leaves him to helplessly raise his lightsaber as Anakin hammers against it relentlessly. At last, with one more mighty blow, Anakin takes Dooku's right hand, causing the Count's lightsaber to drop to the ground. Dooku is beaten, but Skywalker continues to fight. He raises his blade for the killing blow. "Anakin!" Qui-Gon's commanding voice booms out from across the courtyard. It was a single word, but one imploring for him to show mercy, and it was enough for Anakin to come to his senses. The terrified Dooku appears to show hopeful gratitude. He looks to Qui-Gon, and then to the boy. After a long moment where Anakin catches his breath, he looks around to all of the acolytes now surrounding them. He calls out with a loud voice that their leader has been defeated, that they do not have the strength that they believe they possess, but that they now possess something different, a choice. Anakin declares that they now all have a right to leave. Otherwise, he will more than gladly take care of all of them. The acolytes collectively take him up on the first offer and funnel out of the castle of Sereno en masse. Obi-Wan Kenobi places Dooku under arrest as Anakin and Qui-Gon joyfully reunite. Skywalker gives back Qui-Gon's lightsaber, jokes that his master that he's glad Qui-Gon is back since he didn't have time to rebuild the hut alone. But Jinn tells his student that they will not be going back to Dathomir. He no longer has anything left to teach Anakin. It was the will of the Force that all of this had happened, as the time had now come for him to fulfill his destiny. Anakin asks what is next then, and Qui-Gon simply tells him that this is a path that he will need to find himself. Clarifying, Anakin states exactly what Qui-Gon Jinn is implying, that he's not coming with him. The Jedi Master smiles softly and places a firm hand on Anakin's shoulder, stating that his path to the Force lies elsewhere, and besides, he senses a great change in the galaxy. As if on cue, Obi-Wan gets a chime on his communicator. It was Mace Windu. He begins to tell Kenobi that he's urgently needed on the planet of Geonosis. This whole time, Plo Koon and Ahsoka Tano have been following the path that Obi-Wan would have originally followed in Attack of the Clones. The two of them find themselves having been captured by the Separatists and are slated for execution. Windu intends to crash the party with a large number of Jedi Knights, but he needs Obi-Wan there. And with that, all three of them part ways, each taking different ships to go off into the galaxy, Obi-Wan to a battle which will lead to the beginning of the Clone Wars, Qui-Gon to the Wellspring of Life where he will complete his training and retain his identity after death, and Anakin, simply following where the Force will take him. One thing Anakin always appreciated about Qui-Gon's training was the exposure to many different ideas and perspectives on the Force. Learning from the Night Sisters had shown Anakin a lot. But it was now clear to him that even their tricks would not be enough in the long run. He had managed to put Darth Maul off kilter, but it didn't avail him much against someone like Dooku. If this Darth Sidious was to be much more dangerous than they were, Anakin was going to need a lot more than a few spells to defeat him. Not to mention, he still had to discover a way to find the Sith Lord. Not only this, but Anakin wanted insight into what life was going to be like for him after his mission was complete. Was killing the Sith all his destiny as the Chosen One ever was? Or was there something more? He supposed that he would have to figure his destiny out on his own now. After doing research, Anakin travels around to search the galaxy for other Force-based religions, those that he can study and learn from. His first stop was the stormy world of Doran, where he would train with the Baron Doe sages. From them, he would learn to remain calm in the storm. This was something that he had tried and failed to do against Dooku. When his body was swept up in instinct, he was driven more and more with excitement that left him open to wielding the dark side more freely. Qui-Gon will not always be around to shake him back to his senses, so the sages allowed Anakin to put the storm into perspective. In the process, he would also learn many of their electricity-based abilities, such as the Hasat Dur, an ability that allowed him to suffuse his body with electromagnetic radiation. After lots of trial and error, Anakin would end up developing electric judgment as well, granting him the power to summon white force lightning. During his journeys, Anakin would keep in contact with Padme. He found her to be very soothing to talk to, and even though she was incredibly busy as a senator, they still found plenty of time to chat over long-distance holo messages. Whenever he went to a particularly lonely region of space, he was able to use the Hasat Dur technique to boost the ship's communication signal. Now finally able to be around technology again, Anakin is able to indulge in his fascination, building things, learning how it all connected together. Being on Dathomir meant that he had very limited reach when it came to machinery, but he never lost the touch and passion he had as a child for fixing things. This helped him pass the time between his long journeys. During his tinkering, he would repair his old yellow lightsaber as well, but he would construct a brand new hilt, something with a better grip for dueling. He also found that he enjoyed using Master Qui-Gon's lightsaber as well, in tandem with his own. So Anakin constructs for himself a new green lightsaber as well, dual-wielding the yellow and the green in conjunction. The next Force-based religion he would interact with was a sentient plant-based being known as the Revween. The Revween reveals to Anakin all about their light side-oriented religion known as the Tia. To them, the Force was something in everything that breathed, and when beings moved in accordance with its will, there was harmony. When a being moved against it, there was discord. They did their best to ensure that harmony remained dominant in the galaxy, though they did accept that conflict was a natural part of life. This was a breath of fresh air for Anakin, who knew the Jedi seemed to fear conflict and do whatever they could to keep it from happening. Yet the Tia simply moved in accordance with how the Force guided the events of history, and they did all they could to protect the sanctity of life and all that breathes. As I'm sure many of you have picked up on by now, we have decided to give the story of Legends Jacen Solo following the Yuuzhan Vong War to Anakin. Jacen would venture off into the galaxy to learn from as many Force-based religions as possible, and we believe that if Qui-Gon Jinn had been the one to train Anakin, Anakin would have taken on this same pilgrimage. While Skywalker appreciates the lessons, he still doesn't quite get the answers that he's looking for. He is no closer to figuring out how to find this Darth Sidious, nor what it will mean for him to be the Chosen One after the destruction of the Sith. Is he meant to die with them? Is his usefulness to the galaxy mute beyond this? Anakin knows he must do something desperate. He must seek the dark side. Anakin tries locating dark side cults, hoping to hop the fence for a little bit of perspective. In the pursuit, he finds a strange religion, the Sorcerers of Tund. The Sorcerers of Tund were a Sith-adjacent cult from deep in history. Unfortunately, Anakin learns very little from their ramblings, and in fact, he is repulsed by their madness. That's when he began to wonder about the dark side itself. He was always taught by Qui-Gon to walk the line, to remain in the balance. It was his destiny to master the light and the dark side of the Force as the Chosen One, but the dark side seemed so corruptive. How was one supposed to interact with it when it only seemed to cause harm, to draw one towards death, annihilation? The only reason he could use Night Sister magic was because it walked a middle path. One day, while allowing his ship to drift into the emptiness of space, Anakin gets into a rhythm of putting together a droid from parts that he had lying around. With his hands busy, his mind drifted, and he falls into a deep meditative trance. He never liked sitting for meditation, but instead, moving around allowed him to think more clearly. Here, he searches the Force deeply, going deeper than he has ever gone before, plumbing for the answers to his conundrums. Suddenly, a blinding light pours in through the viewport. The light is brighter and brighter by the moment, until it finally envelops the entire ship. Then, all goes dark. Anakin awakens on a lush green world. The first thing he notices is that he can sense the Force impossibly strong here. He is greeted by a very tall woman in white, with flowing green hair. She introduces herself as the daughter, and states that he has been expected. Anakin is deeply confused, and begins asking questions, but the daughter brushes them all off, instead telling him to follow her. He has a long-awaited appointment with her father. Along the way, they are attacked by the Sun, the embodiment of the dark side wielding his gargoyle form, but Anakin is able to defend himself. The daughter, however, takes his place to battle the Sun and orders Skywalker to keep going to the Temple of the Ones. Anakin finally makes it there and meets the father at last. The father of Mortis is pleased to see the Chosen One has finally made it to their dwelling. He explains, albeit cryptically, that they are powerful beings who represent the light, dark, and the balance of the Force in the galaxy. It was his duty to keep his children in balance, lest they throw the galaxy into total chaos and ruin. And very soon, that duty must fall to another, to Anakin. The father explains that he is dying, and that it was foretold that the Chosen One would be the one to replace him. Anakin, though, is not too keen on this idea. He still has friends on the outside, plus an enemy to destroy, a life to live. He only just left Dathomir, dreaming his entire life of adventure. The past months have been the first taste of what that adventure could mean, and he doesn't want to give it up. The father finds his desire to be narrow-minded in scope, but concedes that he is unable to force Anakin to stay. And indeed, since Anakin arrived without Obi-Wan and Ahsoka as he did in the original continuity, the father has no way to compel him. Having said that, Anakin isn't actually in a hurry to leave. Unlike in the original timeline, he's not rushing to get back to the War of the Clone Wars. He's on a journey this time of self-discovery. And to Anakin, this seems like an important opportunity that has just presented itself. The will of the Force recognized. If these beings were a form of representation of the dichotomy of the Force, then perhaps he could train with them. Perhaps they could show him the path to balance, a true way to interact with the dark side without falling as Dooku had. Anakin inquires about what the father suggests, and ultimately agrees. After all, if Anakin stays, that gives him more time to convince the Chosen One to take his place. The father has Anakin formally meet the son and the daughter. Anakin asks the son why he attacked them, and the son simply says that he wanted to see if he really was the Chosen One, or if their doddering old father had just made another mistake. He's pleased to say that it seems that Anakin is who he says he is, but the son makes it clear that this will not be his last test. He has much more he wants to see from the Chosen One after expecting him for eons. In this setting, the son doesn't ever try to overthrow the father, or even corrupt Anakin as he did before. This would have been several years before the original events of Mortis, where the son was pushed to his absolute limits in the Clone Wars. In reality, the son has never been outright evil, just simply misguided. And in this new timeline, he will be instrumental in Anakin's understanding and processing of the dark side. For the next 3 years, Anakin will remain on Mortis, training with the Ones. He shows them what he knows of the light and the dark sides, particularly with his Night Sister magic. The father is impressed with his grasp on the Force, yet he sees there is much for improvement. Anakin appears to lack a deeper cosmic understanding of the Force, and his magic, while effective, lacks a certain commitment. It is for this reason that Anakin spends a great deal of time around the son of Mortis, who allows him to explore the destructive nature of the dark side, its true form and place in the galaxy. The son teaches Anakin to explore his private passions, to allow himself to want things for himself rather than keep his desires under lock and key. He wants him to feel. While Qui-Gon never made Anakin feel like he had to suppress himself, the boy inadvertently developed a sense of his own, a deep sense that his own well-being was less important than his destiny. His future was the only thing he thought of day in and day out. That was what Qui-Gon had sacrificed his entire livelihood to cultivate, to train him to achieve. Anakin felt an urgency to do Master Jinn proud, and to do what was expected of him. Otherwise, everything Qui-Gon had sacrificed would just be in vain. But in truth, Anakin was so much more than being a savior, and he wanted to explore those things. For instance, he wanted to reconnect with Padme. She made him feel like he had a future beyond his destiny. It is these forms of desires that the Son pushes Anakin to embrace, to allow himself to want without guilt. It is the Father who shows Anakin the volcanic valley of Mortis. He teaches Anakin that in nature, destruction is meant to clear a way for the new. The volcano will erupt, covering the land in ash, tearing down formations in its path, permanently altering the landscape. But once it has settled, fresh flowers and vegetation will grow from the newly fertile ground. This is the true balance of the Force. The dark side for setting the slate clean, and the light side for its regrowth. The Father teaches Anakin that what many beings get wrong about balance is that it is not a stagnant place that one sits in. Day and night cannot coexist at the same time. Balance is a cycle that is constantly in motion. There is a time set apart for the day, just as there is a time set apart for night. Just as the volcano must have time to explode and destroy before the flowers and life has time to reclaim the land. This is the way Anakin's soul must be, how his alignment should work. Balance means transience. After training for nearly 3 years on Mortis, Anakin Skywalker is a completely different person. He adopts a new set of white and black tunics with a gray cloak, all to represent a transient view on the Force. He's more accepting of the idea that he should be the one to keep the children in balance. However, he makes a deal with the Father. Anakin promises to return one day, but on the condition that he be allowed to have a life first. He has a lot that he needs to accomplish, and as soon as he does, as soon as all of his friends are gone, he will return and claim the Father's place. The Father of Mortis admits that he doesn't know how much longer he has left to live, and he cannot fully guarantee what Anakin is asking. However, he accepts, stating that he will hold out as long as he can, but Anakin must come back when he is called. With the negotiation in place, Anakin Skywalker departs to fulfill his destiny. For a long time, Anakin has been keeping an eye on the galaxy from afar. He has felt its signature in the Force shift and change as the war has raged on. He had come to accept long ago that there was no stopping the war in the beginning. He had long foreseen it in his dreams, but what he did not know was that everyone had been played for fools. While he was on Mortis, he had meditated on his dreams, and he had gained clarity. The Dark Lord of the Sith was behind everything, and now Anakin believed he controlled the Republic. How and where he was doing this was beyond Anakin's sight, but he was fully aware of how to find Sidious now. The answer had been given to him 3 years ago. Darth Maul. Darth Maul was the key to everything. Setting off in his ship, Anakin first contacts Obi-Wan Kenobi. It takes a while for him to ever get a response, but sooner or later, he sees his old friend sporting some kind of white battle armor. They spend some time catching up, and Anakin learns about the current state of the galaxy. The galaxy is in a panic. War has been raging for far too long. Count Dooku escaped captivity quite some time ago, and has been leading the separatist movement, though only a handful of his dark acolytes still back and follow him. Having said that, he's been seen on multiple occasions consorting with Darth Maul, so he's definitely thrown his lot in with the Sith. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine has retained emergency powers long after his term has expired, and the Council is growing suspicious of him. Qui-Gon Jinn has returned from his journey, and has been spending a lot of time at the Jedi Temple. He's even contemplating the possibility of rejoining the Order, but has not committed to a decision yet. As for Obi-Wan himself, he's been in the Outer Rim, serving on the front lines of the sieges. He's also been promoted to a Jedi Master, but during this time, Maul has unfortunately killed Plo Koon, and so Ahsoka Tano has been reassigned as Obi-Wan's Padawan. Anakin takes all of the information in stride, and gets Qui-Gon on the call with himself and Obi-Wan. He tells them that they all need to rendezvous, because he's about to bring this war to an end. Both of the Jedi Masters are surprised by Anakin's words, and they ask if he has located the Sith. Anakin says yes and no, but that he cannot tell them everything over the holo. They need to meet up privately. They rendezvous on none other than Dathomir, with Ahsoka Tano tagging along behind Obi-Wan. Anakin explains his plan. They need to lure Maul into the open. He explains that while he doesn't have a full plan formulated yet, he has a strong feeling that Maul will lead them directly to this Sidious. Ahsoka accurately points out that Maul will not talk, so if he's planning on interrogation, then it's a waste of time. But Anakin says he has something else in mind. Qui-Gon trusts Anakin's plan, and states that it should actually be quite easy to lure Maul out into the open. He has a feeling that the assassin was never quite satisfied with how the three of them left things on Naboo. Looking at Kenobi, Qui-Gon states that it is time they finish what they started 13 years earlier. The Jedi set a trap on the planet of Taris, which borders Republic and Separatist space. They allow word to leak that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn will be there on a secret mission. And just as predicted, Lord Maul arrives as well. On the upper towers of Taris, the three combatants stand off yet again in pouring rain. They were all so much older, sporting gray hair, but the unsettled blood feud was still very much alive, and hanging in the air between them. No words are exchanged. They have nothing left to speak of. They simply ignite their lightsabers in a direct mimicry of how they did on Naboo. Meanwhile, it is Anakin and Ahsoka that sneak up on the real prize, the scimitar, Darth Maul's ship. Anakin was certain that he had caught a glimpse of it on Coruscant 3 years earlier. He hadn't been sure until he conjured a more vivid version of the memory during meditation. Aboard the scimitar, Anakin activates the autopilot with instructions to return to its origin point. As the ship takes off, Anakin looks out the viewport to see the flashing blue, green, and red blades of the duelists on the upper walkways, all of them engaged in mortal combat. He closes his eyes and wishes for the Force to be with them as the scimitar departs Taris and blasts into hyperspace. Anakin is not entirely sure where the ship is going to emerge, but the last place he expected was Coruscant. He had been confronted by Maul in its lower levels many years ago, but he didn't anticipate that it would be somewhere that the Sith assassin frequented. Ahsoka is equally shaken, as the two of them waited to see where the ship would go. The scimitar takes them to the Works District, a section of Coruscant that was largely devoid of life, since it was an industrial sector full of abandoned skyscrapers. The scimitar descends, and eventually lands in the Lee Merge building. Within the dark interiors, Anakin touches the ground and casts a spell. The green ichor spreads around the room and creates something like a holographic replay of the room's history. It depicts Maul kneeling before a cloaked figure, one who gave him instructions before sending him on his way. The green replay of history showed Maul leaving in the scimitar, while the robed figure snuck away through a secret passage hidden in the wall. Anakin very plainly tells Ahsoka that confronting the Sith was his destiny, and that if she interfered, that she would be in grave danger. For that reason, he orders the Padawan to go and alert the Jedi Council immediately. The Sith have been hiding under their noses the entire time. With that, Anakin begins his tracking spell, tailing behind the visualization of one Darth Sidious. Just like in the expanded works novelization Labyrinth of Evil, the vision took him down below the base of the tower into a series of tunnels. Anakin followed the visage of Darth Sidious through the tunnels for what felt like forever. The longer he descended, the more anxious he became. It felt like Sidious was traveling for hours before he finally arrived at his destination, and once he did, he turned around in the elevator and lowered his hood. Anakin stops the spell as if hitting the pause button, and slowly approaches the image. His blood runs cold as he finds himself beholding the familiar face of Palpatine, a man he had seen a few times as a boy, and knew as the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic itself. Things are far worse than he could have ever feared. Anakin knew that Sidious was controlling both sides of the war now, meaning he had to have influence over all of Coruscant. But not like this. Anakin follows the elevator up, which brings him to none other than 500 Republica, the most expensive and exclusive apartment building on all of Coruscant. The staff look surprised, but greet him, stating that the Chancellor is not home, and even if he were, Anakin would need an appointment. Skywalker, however, knows exactly where to find Palpatine. He commandeers a speeder and heads directly for the Senate. He gets the same answer once he arrives in the lobby. Chancellor Palpatine is not taking visitors without appointment. But this doesn't matter. Anakin instead decides to go the VIP route, up the side of the building. Leaping a great height, Anakin propels himself upward, up beyond what most Jedi and Sith can jump with all of their energy. At the apex of his jump, he harnesses his telekinesis to fly upwards to reach the side of the Senate building dome. He navigates his way to the Chancellor's private docking bay and makes his way inside. The Senate guards attempt to stop the intrusion, but before they can even approach, they find themselves unable to stay standing, or even stay awake for that matter. Upon entering within 10 feet of Anakin's presence, they fall to the floor, instantly asleep. Anakin never breaks stride, nor even makes a hand gesture for any of this to happen. Any being that approaches him or sees him striding down the hallway will uncontrollably fall asleep. Palpatine swirls around in his chair as he feels the doors of his inner office get forcibly ripped open. In walks his worst fear, Anakin Skywalker, looking down on Palpatine with a calm but a resolute expression. The Chancellor begins his confused and frightened routine, demanding to know the meaning of this intrusion. Anakin flatly states that he knows Palpatine's secret, and that the Jedi are on their way. There is no one that can hear him if he were to call for security. His plans are over. The Sith have lost. Palpatine continues to feign ignorance, all while sneakily summoning his lightsaber from his sleeve. But Anakin's words make him freeze. "I have waited a long time to meet you, Lord Sidious. Now, meet your fate with some dignity." Fully provoked, Sidious drops all pretense and snarls at him. "The Chosen One, it seems you've let your own myth go to your head." Sidious corkscrews through the air, igniting his red blade and unleashing a Force howl. Anakin feels the scream attempting to sever his ties to the Force, but he shrugs it off. Standing strong, Palpatine's speed is admirable, but Sidious finds his blade stopped completely short of its mark. There Anakin stood, grasping the lightsaber blade with his bare hand. This was the same thing that the father had done to Anakin in the original timeline. This is an advanced application of Phantom Menace that came naturally to the ones of Mortis due to their mighty strength. But after 3 years, Anakin has quickly ascended beyond Jedi, beyond many of the most powerful Force wielders in galactic history. Sidious is immediately stunned out of whatever attack he was going to attempt, as Anakin nonchalantly shoves the blade back into the hilt, rendering the lightsaber useless. Anakin reaches back and unleashes a Force push of such magnitude that it causes visible distortions in the air between them. Sidious is blown back across the room and dumped unceremoniously over his desk. The huge window behind is obliterated in an instant, causing the wind to scream and whip into the office. Sidious staggers to his feet, fully aware of the danger he's in. Raising his hands, he causes every loose object in the room to fly from its place, turning everything from statues to glass shards into deadly projectiles. Anakin dodges a few things at first, but he surrounds himself in a cocoon of pure Force energy and begins to walk forward. This causes every object to simply move around him, to break against the invisible barrier. As Anakin approaches, Palpatine roars at him, unleashing the full might of the dark side in the form of his perfected Force lightning. Anakin pauses, raising one hand to absorb the electricity. He has to admit, it was far stronger than Dooku's. In fact, Sidious dwarfed the power of the Count and any other Darksider Anakin had ever encountered. Had he challenged the Dark Lord a few years ago, fulfilling his destiny would have been nothing but a pipe dream. However, this is not the same version of himself when he was faced down by Maul or Dooku. Anakin is different, and he intends to show exactly that to Darth Sidious. He closes his fist, absorbing Sidious's power. Transient in the Force, he had been in the light, and now he had tipped the scales to the dark. He could feel the energy course through his body and through his other arm. When he opens his hand, what emerges is Force lightning, but not the standard form. It is crimson red. Every fixture in the room bursts upon its conjuration, and Sidious just manages barely to dive to the side. Some of the crackling red energy struck Palpatine in the side of the face, causing him to spin to the floor. Shrieking and holding his face, Sidious scrambles his way to the window, attempting to escape by jumping up to the domed roof of the Senate building. Outside, the wind of the Coruscant night caused Palpatine's robe to whip around wildly. He moves his way upward, hoping to reach the service hatch towards the apex of the massive dome. However, he was intercepted by a swirl of green mist. When the wind blew the mist his way, it reveals Anakin standing there with a golden and an emerald blade ignited at his side, illuminating the night. There was no escape. Darth Sidious drew his own lightsaber, though after what had occurred in the office, he wondered how much good it would do him. He thought he was the most powerful being in the galaxy, but this Jedi, no, this chosen one, was beyond anything he thought was possible. Was he even human anymore? Sidious thought to himself. Qui-Gon was certainly a different Jedi, but what could he have possibly taught the boy? By the light of their sabers, Anakin could see that he left the side of Palpatine's face horribly scarred. The skin was shriveled and wrinkled, but the injuries also unveiled Palpatine's bright yellow eyes. In a way, Anakin thought, the scarring had shown who Sidious truly was. "You are going to pay for all of the lives you've taken," Anakin shouts above the wind. Sidious, though, looked like a cornered animal, ready to pounce. "No, no. You will die." With that defiant declaration, the final duel began. Sidious was fast, very fast. He was as a living shadow, melding with the night. To the naked eye, the only parts of him visible would be the red blurring of his lightsaber. But Anakin could see him perfectly, not in his eyes. Having grown in tune with the cosmos itself, Anakin now perceived the universe very differently. He could see the motions of the Force, and the flux of the light and the dark. In this moment, his lightsabers became the extension of that vision. He was facing the thickest darkness he had ever encountered, and so to counterbalance, he became the brightest light the galaxy had ever seen. Below, the Jedi Council finally arrived with a massive host of Jedi in tow. Yoda, Windu, and whoever else were available had departed their transports. With them was a full company of the Coruscant Royal Guard clone troopers. Ahsoka points up to the top of the dome, and every Jedi feels their breath taken from their bodies. They cannot even see who is dueling. It appears as though bolts of multicolored lightning were battling on the rooftops. They flashed and clashed, appearing one place one moment and then another the next. It is only Mace Windu who can perceive a massive shatter point on the roof of the building. Anakin was doing what he had been trained to do for a decade. Yoda calls for the guard to follow him, and the Jedi rush into the Senate building to make their way to the rooftop. Sidious and Skywalker continue their duel for destiny, but the fight now is merely a formality. Sidious had lost the moment he tried to fight, a fact that was becoming more and more clear the more the duel prolonged. All of his planning, all of his schemes, they were slipping through his fingers in the face of the Chosen One's power. What made it worse is he could barely tell if Anakin was even trying anymore. More than once he had thought he had caught Skywalker by surprise, but the boy simply let go of his saber, taking hold of it with the Force, then orbiting it telekinetically around his body, forming a shell of defense that Sidious couldn't possibly penetrate. Even Sidious was being backed up across the roof now, defending himself from two floating sabers that attacked from either side of him, while Skywalker simply walked forward, calmly, staring him down. Anakin summons both lightsabers back to his hands in an instant, and when that happened, red force lightning crackled between the blades like Tesla coils. The energy builds as Skywalker begins to swing the blades around his head, his eyes still fixed on Sidious. Finally, he releases a charged blast of lightning from his sabers in a focused beam. Sidious held up his blade in order to defend himself, but the power of Skywalker's lightning courses down his lightsaber and causes the hilt to explode. "You are beaten," Anakin calls out. "Surrender and you will be given..." Anakin pauses. His breath is caught in his throat. A disturbance in the Force shot through him. Across the galaxy on Terrace, Qui-Gon had just taken one of Maul's sabers through the chest. Sidious grins wickedly, taking advantage of Skywalker's lapse in concentration, unleashing his strongest torrent of Force lightning yet. Having nothing to lose, Sidious gives everything that is left in his body in one final attack, hoping to at least take Anakin down with him. Anakin is holding off the lightning, but with much effort. The dark side rushes to him faster than he has ever felt it before. He can feel it burning him from the inside, shouting at him to give in. He has just lost the last member of his family. He has just lost his father, and he's not even there to see it. He didn't get to hear Qui-Gon's last words, or have his master see him fulfill his destiny. All of the windows of the Senate building instantly shatter. The power of the Force begins to swirl around Anakin like a typhoon. His eyes roll back and begin glowing a piercing blue. The smile on Sidious's face has now vanished. But nonetheless, he continues to pour every ounce of his power into his lightning. It is now when the Jedi Council arrive on the roof, but they find themselves unable to approach because of Anakin's unrestrained power. However, they do see in plain sight the Supreme Chancellor using Force Lightning. What Ahsoka had told them was true. Chancellor Palpatine was the Sith Lord they were looking for. Anakin's body shook, the power of the Force swelling to him like never before. But then he heard it. Anakin, remember who you are. Warm, a deep tone, unmistakable. It was the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. Somehow, his master was speaking to him from beyond the grave. Anakin holds off Sidious's lightning with his yellow saber and pulls back his green one. Concentrating all of his Force power, he hurls the blade forward. The green saber pierces Sidious's stream of darkside energy and is plunged deep into his chest. It was at that instant that Anakin sensed it. Kenobi's saber had struck true on Maul, cutting him in half at the waist. Sidious stared down at the saber in his chest and slowly staggered forward, falling off of the side of the roof. Sidious falls down to the Senate Plaza below, and upon impacting the ground, his essence releases in an explosion of Force power that cyclones upward toward the sky. Darth Sidious and Darth Maul are dead, and with them, the Sith as we know it. Order 66 dies with Sidious, meaning the Jedi Purge remains inactivated. Indeed, Dooku is still at large, but without Sidious pulling the strings, it is not long before the Republic would be able to win the Clone Wars legitimately. Qui-Gon Jinn receives a proper Jedi's funeral, and Anakin ensures that a memorial of him is constructed on both Coruscant and on Dathomir. The Jedi Council recognize Anakin Skywalker as an honorary member of their order, and invite him to the Jedi Temple anytime he desires. Because of the influence of Darth Sidious, the Jedi are unfortunately forced to take control of the Senate, as well as the courts, until they can root out every bit of the Sith's influence that remained behind. Anakin and Padme eventually marry on Naboo, and have two beautiful children that Anakin is able to raise in the same training that Qui-Gon gave him. After decades, Anakin decides to distance himself from galactic politics, as well as the wider Jedi Order. He takes his position as a watchful sentinel, going wherever the galaxy and the Force calls him next. This causes him to run aground with the resurgent version of Dooku's Dark Acolytes, but it isn't long before he takes down Dooku once and for all. Leia follows in her mother's footsteps, becoming a diplomat, and ultimately ends up as the Supreme Chancellor. Luke becomes a Jedi, and is the second apprentice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, with Luke Skywalker eventually becoming the Jedi Order's next Grand Master. Once Padme passes of old age, Anakin fulfills his promise to the Father, and returns to Mortis to take his place. Once there, he is able to once again share in a conversation with his old master, Qui-Gon Jinn. Since Mortis is potent with the Force, Qui-Gon manifests himself anytime he likes. But not all in the galaxy is perfect. Before the father dies, he tells Anakin of something dangerous waiting, a creature known as Abeloth, an entity currently trapped in the Maw. Skywalker makes sure to start preparing for her release as soon as possible, being the only being in the galaxy that could ever stop her. And from that point onward, Anakin attains immortality, becoming the keeper of balance in the Force forever. For everyone who stayed with me throughout this entire journey, thank you. This story is a special one, not just because of what it explores, but because of how long it took to finally bring it to life the way I always envisioned. I started this idea years ago, and at the time, it honestly grew far too big, too complicated, and I had to step away. But it never left me. Coming back to it now, rebuilding it, refining it, and finally, finishing it in a way that feels complete. It means a lot more than I can really ever put into words. And the fact that you were all willing to wait, to return to it, and to give your time to a story like this genuinely means everything. I hope you enjoyed this version. I hope it captured the passion I have for Star Wars, and the idea that one change, Qui-Gon Jinn training Anakin Skywalker, would have reshaped everything. A different destiny, a more balanced path, and maybe even a better outcome for the galaxy, while still keeping the conflict, the tension, and the complexity that makes this universe so incredible. From Dooku's nuanced position, to the final confrontation with Maul and Sidious, this was always meant to be a story about how fragile fate really is. And none of it would matter without you all being here to experience it. So truly, thank you for the patience, for the support, and for continuing to care about stories like this one. This has been one of the most meaningful projects I have ever worked on, and I am really happy that I can now finally share it with you. So, my friend, thank you again, and as always, I will see you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.